Hi YouTube! Welcome back to the Tarot Study Series where we go through all 78 cards together, looking at different interpretations of the cards, some of my own spin, as well as some examples. So just to kick us off today, we're coming back in with the Emperor card. First, a couple of logistical notes. One, I know my lighting is not that great in my current house, and I am working on that. But please pardon the less than ideal lighting. Also note that I'll be probably looking down a lot. That's just because I'm looking at my notes. So have some grace with me for that. With this series, I'm going to try to get us caught up to the seasons. So we have our major arcana cards that match up with particular astrological seasons through a good part of the year. We are going to be talking about the Emperor today, which is associated with Aries. So you might want to think back to late March through the first 3 weeks of April, and you might find that some of the themes we talk about here were particularly resonant at that time. And then we'll get into the Hierophant as quickly as we can. It probably won't still be Taurus season, but hopefully by Gemini we will have caught up with the seasons. So that's the plan. As we all know, plans do not always, things do not always go according to plan. So just be aware of that. Okay, so we're looking at the Emperor today. What is the Emperor? To me, the Emperor is really about healthy power, healthy structure. So you may recall we talked in this series about the previous majors. We've got the Magician who's coming in with the number 1, the kind of will, the spark, the magic, just showing up and being in their independent space, channeling down. Then we have the High Priestess bringing in the 2, so we've got the connection and the mystery and the duality and what does it mean when 1 and 1 come together. We've got the Empress, where we're looking at the 3, which includes sort of an additional element of tending to energy, receiving, as well as creativity and birthing that comes out of a 3. When you bring 1 and 2 together, you get something that is totally different. And now we're at the Emperor, and we're talking about the stability, the structure, and frameworks that come from the 4. The 4 is probably the most, well, it's not probably, it is the most stable, right? You think of a square, you think of a 4-legged table. So 3 can be stable, but 4 adds that extra element to it, and that is really what the Emperor does. So when we ask ourselves who the Emperor is, and here, I'll just, let's have an example. I'll do this one. Pretty generic. Not generic, I shouldn't say that, but whoo, the light's not so great. So you can see this representing the box of the 4. So when we're talking about the Emperor, again, we're talking about grounded, stable energy. We're talking about structure and authority, but not unhealthily so. And I think sometimes this gets a little messed up. Folks tend to have a negative association with the Emperor, with patriarchal authority. And I would say that the unhealthy expression of structure and authority could come up when you have the Emperor reversed, but I actually think that it's more likely to be other cards if we're talking about unhealthy structure, because while that could be the shadow side of the Emperor, that's not exactly how I read. So a lot of authors, you'll notice if you read about basic tarot book, we'll talk about the Emperor as relationship with authority, daddy issues, even policing in our justice system and in criminal justice elements. That really does not sit right with me, particularly given how toxic, how broken those systems are where I live. And maybe if this card showed up reversed and also in the context of a reading with other cards that supported that interpretation, that could come in, but that is not the core of the Emperor for me. Now, I do think the Emperor can represent institutions, structures, policies, and boundaries that serve you, that are healthy and positive, or that you yourself create. I think that is part of the Emperor. It does bring up your relationship to authority, but it's not inherently negative, and it's definitely not a stand-in for cops or for the state. That is not a modern, healthy interpretation of the Emperor for me. I think it's about actual security and stability, not security theater. So stability, also planning can come into this. So having a plan, the tangible nature of the Emperor is very strong. Things that show up in the physical world. Healthy leadership and decision making can come under the Emperor. So if you're looking for an ally card or support in leadership, the Emperor is awesome for that. Beth Malden at Little Red Tarot talks about the ability to navigate systems and to lead within systems with the Emperor, which I think is a really interesting take. If you think about the difference between a kind of a radical justice approach to social justice and the nonprofit sphere, for example, I think the Emperor could represent that kind of organizational energy to trying to make change. Whether or not you feel good about nonprofits and the nonprofit industrial complex, I think that does come up in the Emperor. The idea of being able to navigate even the systems that are unhealthy and to create change can very much come under this. Foundations, healthy structure, again, policies that give us a framework to engage. I also think there's a strong relationship between this card and the Hierophant, which we'll talk about in the next episode, in the sense of having your own moral code. So the Hierophant, we will talk about a lot around spiritual authority and autonomy and figuring out your own kind of morals. And I think the Emperor can kind of be the putting that down, the structure of that. Even like language, I think, has an interesting relationship between the Hierophant and the Emperor that you could explore. So, y'all know I get a lot of the basis for some of my tarot interpretations from Lindsay Mack, and Lindsay talks about redwood trees and mountains a lot when she talks about the Emperor. So the idea of the sacred birthright to take up space, the idea that a big tall tree or a mountain doesn't ask whether it's allowed to be there, it just shows up, right? I think that showing up, that being present is very much there. And depending on your cultural background and tradition, and of course being mindful of not appropriating traditions that you're not familiar with, you might think of this as yang energy, as active energy, as the sacred masculine. All of those things could come into this, whatever the equivalent to that general idea is in your culture. There's also, I think, the idea of rooting down. So the Emperor is, again, the number 4. And to me, I have a strong connection between 4 and Earth as the suit of pentacles. That's a personal association. I don't know that everyone would have that. But for me personally, that really resonates. I tend to, this is really random and just personal, but I tend to associate fire with the 1, water with the 2, air with the 3, earth with the 4. I don't know if anyone else does that or if anybody's seen that kind of association. I'd be curious. But I really think of the idea of a root structure, a grounded energy. Again, with that mountain or that tree, it goes far, far beneath the surface. So that kind of establishment. But it's not a rigid strength either. I think sometimes another trap to fall into with the Emperor is thinking that it's necessarily rigid or authoritarian or patriarchal. No, I think that a healthy Emperor energy is actually flexible strength. So if you think about, I'll give an example of my own experience with posture here. I'll just like sit up a little more in my creaky old chair. But I've been engaging a lot with the idea of a healthy posture and a better sitting posture because I tend to have some lower back and mid-back pain. And I have noticed that it's really important to combine a flexibility practice with a strength practice. So working on the strength of my core to support my lower back, but also working on the flexibility of my hips, the flexibility of my shoulders. So strength and flexibility need to go together. If you think about your own body, if you're inflexible, you tend to have to compensate somewhat. And of course, this is not to shame or say anything negative about folks who aren't able to have movement practices in their life for whatever reason, folks who have disabilities and may not be able to access strength and flexibility, or in the case maybe of like EDS, may have too much access to flexibility. The Emperor is also for you. You can extend that metaphor to think about your own body and what ways that maybe strength and flexibility do take place together, maybe in internal systems or specific parts of your body. Or maybe you want to think about physical structures like a building, if the body metaphor doesn't apply to you. But I think flexibility and strength really go together. I want to make a note right here too about the elemental associations with the Emperor, because I mentioned that is very earthy to me. The rootedness, Emperor feels very earthy to me. But Emperor is typically associated with Aries, which is a fire sign. So how does that work? Like, how do those two things go together? I will admit that personally, I do work with the Emperor and Aries. But for me, the Emperor is also very Capricorn. I'll talk about that a little more in a bit. But that's my own personal thing. I just feel like the structure and the hard work and the routine of Capricorn can really also be Emperor. But there is that fire. There's that fire there. So when you think about the Aries association, Aries is the first sign of the zodiac. Aries is very much about showing up, being there, jumping in, does not need to necessarily wait, just wants to try, wants to experience things in the physical, tangible world. And that is Emperor. I think that energy of taking up space is very important. The Emperor is just going to be present, is going to be there. So there is that fire, but for me it's like a grounded fire. So I think it is earth and fire for me personally. I also want to note that the Emperor can be a really good ally for you if you're struggling with people pleasing, which is something that I'm working on recovering from myself. Michelle T talks about the Emperor as basically giving zero fucks, which I think is awesome. Like, I think the not in an unhealthy way, not in a giving zero fucks about justice, for example, but not being overly swayed by other people. So having the flexibility, but with the rootedness, means that you're open to other interpretations of truth. You're open to learning. The Emperor absolutely is flexible to working with the environment around them, because the Emperor is in the physical realm and needs to interact with the world. If you think of a big tall tree, right, a big tall tree can still be hit by a hurricane, but can withstand it. And so I think that it's like the giving no fucks in the sense of that overly people-pleasing tendency to care what other people think. That's not the Emperor. The Emperor cares what people think in the sense that the Emperor cares about people who are close to them, important to them, aligned with them, in their community. Absolutely responsiveness to community, but not responsiveness to those who are totally unaligned, right? I think about feeling like I didn't have control in my past. Like, I had really very little control, very little access to personal power, which is another Emperor keyword, because of the power of what other people would think about me. So growing up Southern especially, I think there's a lot of that idea of this like all-seeing gaze that will, show up if your garden doesn't look nice or whatever, things that you don't really need to care about it unless you want to. A good example of this would be, I remember being in my early 20s and thinking that if anyone found out that I wrote fan fiction, I would either have to die or withdraw from society. Like, it was I was like, this is a secret that no one can know. No one can know this shameful thing about me. And then as I grew older, I realized that I love fan fiction. And fan fiction is like a healthy expression of passion and enthusiasm about characters. And it's an opportunity to build worlds. World building also, I think, could be very Emperor. And it's kind of like, who the fuck cares? Like, I give zero fucks in the sense that if someone wants to judge me for something that isn't harmful to me, then bye. There's also a little bit of devil in that as well. We'll talk about the devil, and I mentioned Capricorn, so there is a tie for me. Devil is traditionally associated with Capricorn. I kind of also feel like the Emperor is in there, and I think there's some of that discernment of the devil, which we'll learn later, really brings in the idea of, if other people are saying something is harmful to you, but it's not actually harmful, you don't have to listen to them. And that starts with the foundation of being really rooted in your Emperor self and being able to discern. By the way, if you want to hear more stories like that, more metaphors and ideas for how you can work with the Emperor, I will be posting soon a piece called The Emperor Goes to Church on my Patreon at patreon.com/queermagical. So please do go sign up and check that out, and we can learn together how to work more with the Emperor. Some other ideas about the Emperor that I got from various sources. So Eclectic Tarot talks about being in control, asking questions about who's in control of the situation. When you pull that card, you might want to stop and think about power and control and where those are showing up in the situation that you're pulling cards for. It's also, I think about, like I mentioned earlier, personal power and healthy control. versus the shadow side of that. So power can be a bad thing if it is corrupt and toxic and exercised in a unthinking, inflexible, rigid way. But it can also be a really positive thing, and reclaiming our power can really be a big part of this card. The Word Witch talks about the idea, this is a Charlie Claire Burgess, talks about the idea of cultivated growth. And I really like their description here. So I think I mentioned in the Empress episode, which you can turn back to check in on, of tarot study, I think I mentioned how Charlie talks about the Empress as sort of wild, abundant growth. And the Emperor is the counterpart to that moves from that wildness of the Empress that's just like plants everywhere, right? You can imagine a garden that hasn't been, or a yard that hasn't been tended to. Actually, my mom's backyard is a great example of this. My mom has this beautiful backyard that I think is beautiful. I think a lot of people wouldn't, but it is wild because she, for various reasons, health issues, she hasn't been able to do anything with it. And so the grass has grown up, trees have grown up, bushes have grown up. It's hosting this huge ecosystem of animals and plants, and it's really beautiful. I mean, you can't get to the shed at the top of the hill anymore. It literally is like a wilderness you have to push through. But I think that's like the Empress idea. And then if someone were to come in and kind of trim that and make it a certain shape, that would be the Emperor. So bringing that order out of abundance, embracing and taking in the abundance, and then using, again, the discernment. And I keep feeling that word discernment. It's not in my notes, but it's just coming to me here. The discernment to say, okay, we've got all this abundance now, what are we going to pick out? I know I'm going through this a lot right now in my business, is there's like 9 million things I could do for money. And so that all of which I would enjoy, but it's like, let's pull out, let's figure out what's the structure, what's the plan. The Emperor has a business plan. It's the energy of the implementer. If you think about, sometimes in organizations you have the person who has the big ideas. Maybe they're the CEO, maybe they're a chief creative officer of some kind, depending on the kind of business it is. But you have people who are really good at brainstorming and bringing up ideas and just like boom, 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 lightning. And then you have the people who often might be like the chief of staff, the second in command, the VP of operations, something like that. It's very much an energy I feel good with, that brings the structure to those big ideas, that takes the big ideas and says, okay, how do we make this tangible? How do we bring it into the physical world and execute the plan? I mean, you have people who are great at both, so it's good to pair those energies together. Bakar Wintner in, I don't know if it's a Wintner or Vintner. I always want to do a German, but I'm not sure that's right. Anyway, Bakara in WTF is the tarot, talks about how if the Emperor is working right, if the Emperor is fully aligned, you're not going to notice the Emperor. Because it's about order and it's about balance and about keeping others safe. It's protection. It's not an egoic thing. And again, sorry to keep self-promoting, but I will point you over to the Patreon because I am going to talk more about that kind of idea of the difference between a kind of egoic leadership and like pushing self forward. And it may take some life experience to get past that and get into the energy of being a leader, but the leadership is not about you. The leadership is about exponential growth. And if you are actually in like a kind of traditional like white collar job and you've read management books, this is the idea of when you become a manager, it's no longer about you, it's about your team, and it's about the exponential growth of a team working well together. So the Emperor is able to really manage all those pieces and coordinate a good, healthy flow. Bakara also talks about healthy institutions again, and the idea of creative constraint, the way that, again, back to kind of earthy kind of structure can allow for more freedom. If you've heard the term, constraint breeds creativity, I think it's really true. If you stare at a blank page and you're not an artist and you try to make art, you might freak out. I do this. But if you have a specific exercise that you are creating art within, you may find it easier to do that. So it's like taking that Empress creativity, but giving it a little structure to make it flow more easily. I think I really love this because for me personally, holding space is really a big thing that I do. It's something that I am excited to do in one-on-one work with clients. I think that I do it really well naturally with others. And part of that was developing kind of earthy tendencies and coping mechanisms and tools in order to contain my own very watery birth chart. So I have a very watery energy, a very flowing creative energy, but like I need that container. So I know I keep coming back to earth Emperor technically associated with fire, but I do think that's definitely in there. If you think about like a really amazingly run activist event, for example, that helps people to do really tough work around anti-racism and healing and identity development and challenging each other, but creating a safe, healthy container for that where people can really feel upheld. I'm not a huge fan of the term safe space for a number of reasons, but I think that idea of safe space, or one alternative that I like that's been suggested, is a brave space. It's very Emperor, the idea of creating a space, creating a container with specific boundaries, expectations, so that people can participate to the fullest of their ability without feeling fear. It's hard to do that completely, and that's why safe space, I think, makes assumptions about people's ability to access that, and particularly if they're in a marginalized group. But the idea of a brave space, I think, does really resonate with the Emperor energy. Another example might be a business that allows an artist to sell their work and to clear time for doing their art by making the money they need to support themselves. So that can be in there as well. Just another one more, I think, person's ideas I want to bring in, and I cannot figure out who this person is or where I got this from. So I made notes. I believe they might have been a writer for Little Red Tarot, but their name is Siobhan, and I didn't write down a last name. Sorry about that. If anybody knows, leave it in the comments. But Siobhan has this really great thing, the idea of the Emperor as a protector of nascent creative rebellions. I love that. Protector of nascent creative rebellions. So if you think about the creative rebellion, might be more of an Empress energy coming up, and then a protector, someone to hold the line and make space for people, whether it's yourself or others. Because creativity can be really sensitive and really fragile, and so I think the Emperor is that beautiful container. And I think this brings together actually the ideas of Charlie Claire's idea of cultivated growth, the idea of kind of trimming and making a shape out of wild abundance, and then the idea of constraint bringing creativity comes together in this idea of protectiveness. It's the highest expression of that Empress-Emperor pairing that I think goes way beyond a binary masculine or feminine. This protectiveness, I think about like how I feel personally as a queer adult towards queer youth, and I'm not a very like protective person in general, but if somebody says shit about like an 11-year-old trans girl, I will go off. Like whatever the non-binary version of a mama bear is, that is me when somebody insults queer young people. Or similarly, when I was a manager, with my people, like I was very protective of my team. I think sometimes maybe too protective, but as a leader, I really wanted to give them cover from external circumstances. So I think like grizzly bear energy could be a really strong Emperor, the idea of protecting the cubs. So I'm going to show you some cards before I ramble too much, because I know you want to see pictures, and I'm sorry about the lighting. I'm going to do my best to make these. Let me just make sure I can see my screen. So where I found a good spot. There it is. Okay. So this is the Emperor in the Herb Crafter's Tarot, an amazing deck that I highly recommend. And what you're seeing here is the Emperor. The Emperor had a moment where I was like, does that say Empress? No. The Emperor is represented by hemlock, the plant hemlock. And so in this card, the guidebook talks about hemlock representing the scaffolding for sacred work. So again, actually this brings in, we were talking about the kind of foundation and scaffolding for creativity coming from the Empress. We could also bring in the 5, the next card, the Hierophant, the spiritual work. It could also be creating a container so that you're able to really explore your morals, your values, your spiritual work as well. So hemlock as a plant, the guidebook notes that it starts out a little bit softer and then toughens with age. And so it's used a lot in house building for this reason, because it's flexible at first. You can do the building and then it's going to solidify, which I really like. Again, coming back to that idea of flexibility and strength, you might need a little more flexibility as you're building something, and then you need strength to hold it in place once it has a shape. So again, you're coming back to that idea of like the posture of needing both, needing the flexibility to achieve the shape and then the strength to hold it. The guidebook also talks about boundaries and how boundaries might start off a little more pliable and then strengthen over time. And I think this is a really important reminder that healthy leadership is always about learning and experimenting. I hate it when I see leaders who just won't try anything because they're so set in their ways. So I think even though hemlock the idea is that it toughens over time. I think we can think about this in a more spiralic way of how the Emperor energy can kind of go back and forth between the more flexible and the less flexible, depending on the circumstances and the needs. And then it's really important to experiment again, to get into the tangible world. The Emperor is about the tangible, and that leaders need to be ready to do that, need to try things. The guidebook finally notes that there is a dual role for the hemlock, because it both supports, it's both the foundation for building, and it's also a foundation for the forest. So it actually supports the rest of the forest as a foundation. The hemlock is needed for a healthy ecosystem in its habitat. So I think that is really cool. And then, of course, you can see in the visual depiction here, it's very ordered. It's got a very specific structure. And so we're going to use that to transition to some other cards that particularly show that structure piece. So we've got, let's start with, okay, literally the Hip Chick Tarot. The keyword is structure. You can see that. Another example, I like how the Gaian, by the way, if anybody wants this deck, it's I bought it brand new. I've only used it a couple times. It just didn't resonate with me. If anyone wants to trade, leave me a comment with what you've got to trade, and I'll let you know if I'm interested. But this is the builder, and again, it's going to be kind of hard to see, but what they are doing with this here is they're carving some really intricate details into this wood. So what I love about this, you've got the tree, you've got the idea of building, but you also have the idea of like patience and quality. You know, this person is carving like really intricate things into this tree that are going to take some time. They're not finished. So I really like that. The Emperor is never really 100% finished. The Emperor really cares about quality and patience. A lot of people talk about father energy with the Emperor, and everybody's got different relationships there. But I do think about my own dad, who is amazing. He's one of the only, like, I'm going to actually not say that. I'm just going to, I don't know who will see this, but I will say that my dad is somebody that I'm extremely close to, and he is kind of a more, like, quiet, reserved kind of energy. You never think of him as the Emperor, right? He's not standing up there like this, but he was a draftsman, and he didn't have the title of architect, but he was always doing the work, and he is so patient, so careful. He cares so much about quality. Like, things that are shoddily made drive him crazy. I think that's a very Emperor thing of like, I am going to take the time to build this right because it'll stand up to generations. So if you think about, I mean, even this, I'm sitting in this kind of creaky, but this big old, probably 1950s, maybe earlier desk and chair that had been sitting in this 1910s house since I don't know how long. The owners let us keep them, and I love that because it feels very Emperor. It's like this sturdy desk that is big and made of wood and will probably always be a perfectly good desk. So that's very Emperor to me. Also, this is from the Spirit Speak. I have the reversed edition, and it's kind of hard to see here, but what I love is that the house is a character. So it's a house, it's got a crown on top and a scepter, and then some nice hairy legs here. And what I love about this card is that you have the idea of leadership, but I think by taking out the face and by taking out like a gendered figure, it's kind of a really healthy thought of just, it's a house, it's a building, it's the four energy. If you're familiar with Steven Universe, this card comes from the Future Vision Gem Tarot. So I will not spoil Steven Universe, so I have to be careful here. But Yellow Diamond, when we first meet her anyway, is very just kind of like, just do the thing. You can see here kind of like dismissing and talking to the Pearl, that's kind of like a minion. So this card to me like makes me think of the part of the Emperor that's like, we set the rules and then we just let it go. Like we delegate, we let other things happen, which can be part of it. I do also want to, I mentioned Lindsay talking about mountains and redwoods. This is, Lindsay's partner Chase has this deck called the Tarot of the Holy Spectrum, which is really good in general and extra good if you're a student of Lindsay's, because I think they clearly work together and talk about the cards. And so you can see this person rising up that's literally part of the mountain that is so stable. And even though there's clouds and maybe storms behind them, you can see that they are really rooted and grounded in that mountain energy. Also with the order and the structure, these are a couple cards that kind of use like math, I guess, a little bit. So like this from the Ostara Tarot, this ram kind of human figure, I don't know if you can see it, but it has kind of tattoos or like, it could be tattoos, they could be drawings, but they're in white. of various sort of patterns. I don't know, some kind of math. It looks like some kind of math. So it brings in that idea of order and structure that comes from like math or science. Another example like this is the Everyday Witch. This emperor is very traditional in some ways. Looks like a king sitting on a throne, but at his feet, and again, I'm so sorry about the lighting, but at his feet, he has unrolled a map of a bunch of constellations. So it's like a sky map. And so that makes me think of the structure and the kind of, the structural pieces of astrology, but also the planning aspect, the idea of looking into the future and making a plan based on the stars. Some more kind of simple versions. So I already showed this one, and I mentioned this is from the Homebound? Yes, Homebound. Oh, I meant to grab the Way Home too, I forgot. Oh well. This is the Homebound Tarot, and I like that you've got two structures. You've got the cube, and you've also got the arch, which is I believe the arch is like the strongest structure or something. I remember hearing something like that about building. Arch is very, very strong, right? So you've got that, and then you've got the way that the figure is kind of has a handout. It gives me this feeling of like guidance and helping someone. It's not just about them, it's about passing on, which I love. This is just fun. It's from the Naked Heart Tarot. I like that it's Earth Mother for Empress, and it's not Sky Daddy, Sky Father for Emperor. The New Elements uses the statue in the Lincoln Memorial. And look, Lincoln is not an unproblematic figure. I want to be clear there. Not necessarily like a role model or anything, but I think the idea of Lincoln, the like distilled idea that a lot of Americans have of Lincoln is of this moral leader, which is again problematic. But if you just want to take that away from the actual person, I think that is very Emperor. This card from the Tarot Fauna I actually pulled because, so you're gonna laugh at this if you're an animal person. I looked at this image and I thought, oh, it's like a mama wolf protecting this little bunny. So it's like protector energy, and I was all happy about finding an example of the protection energy, and then I realized the wolf is not protecting the bunny, the wolf is hunting the bunny. So it's a different Emperor, but you know what? I'm going to believe that the wolf and the bunny are friends, and I can do that if I want to. This is also like a fairly like standard-ish in terms of the person on the throne, but this is from the Tarot of Perpetual Time, and I don't think there is a guidebook for the Tarot of Perpetual Time, so I don't know why, but there are jellyfish, and the Emperor has butterfly wings, and jellyfish and butterfly wings, it softens the Emperor a little bit for me. Another softening of the Emperor is from the Sluttish Tarot. Power is the keyword here, and this is I just love that the biker, the like queer biker, like got the like mud flap girl in the arm, but then on the bicep, but then you see there's a teddy bear, and I love that, like bringing in, the Emperor is strong and powerful, but also can have a teddy bear if they want to, and I think that's very Emperor, right? Strength and flexibility. Do you write fan fiction, whatever it is. So in this card, by the way, we're transitioning into Emperor cards that I have a crush on. So this is one. That's number one. Emperor cards I have a crush on. Number two comes from the Lost Hollow. Does this make anyone else think of Nick Fury? It just makes me think of Nick Fury from the Marvel Cinematic Universe. Nick Fury, again, not an unproblematic character, but does bring in a lot about like accountability and responsibility, and what does it mean to make really big decisions that will affect the entire world and maybe the universe. But also, that's a hot Emperor. I'm into it. Another couple. I don't like the keyword authoritarian, but from the Marble Moon, I have a crush on this green-haired kind of femme Emperor. I love a femme Emperor because, again, the gendering of tarot, not necessary. This is more a traditional kind of daddy Emperor. You've got that feeling. That's all I'm gonna say. I have a crush on this one. And then finally, the last one I've got a big crush on is the Founder from the Numinous Tarot, which I believe you can still get in the third printing. I know it was happening, kickstarting, and I think you can pre-order, but double check that. I just love the Founder. It really has this feeling of like healthy ownership and leading, and then Founder specifically, I really do think to to organizational leadership, and what does it mean to be the founder of something. And then I think a really healthy founder knows when it's time to step down. And in the nonprofit world, I found that is not very common, but I think that a really healthy founder energy would be creating the thing, implementing the thing, and then knowing when it's time to pass the thing on. All right. Last card I want to show you, and it's actually, I'm bringing it up for a very specific point. This is from the Gentle Tarot. This is the Emperor. So it's a seal. It's a big happy seal. I'm pretty sure because it doesn't have tusks, right? So that makes it a seal. And it's not a sea. Oh wait, no, it is a seal, not a sea lion. I've been working on learning my animals. I love the Emperor as a symbol for fat liberation, for the ability to physically take up space and be in your body. And people with fat bodies are particularly often not encouraged to do this. Encouraged to make ourselves smaller, to tuck ourselves in, to put on Spanx, whatever it is, but to physically restrict our form. And that is the opposite of the Emperor, because the Emperor is about the space that we take up is a right to take space. The body we are in is a right to take up a body. And so you could expand this further beyond fat liberation to, like, if you're a wheelchair user, the right to take up space, the right to, like, have a path for at a conference, say, for wheelchair users, so that you can get by people, right? Like, you have just as much right as anyone else to be there. The rights of people with invisible disabilities to take up space and to use resources and to access accommodations without apology, I think could be very Emperor. There's the whole, like, angry black woman trope, and so the right of black women to be angry, to be in their rage, or be in any emotions, not just narrowed down to one, but to be fully in self and present, is something that the United States, at least I'll speak for my own country, tends to very harshly and violently push down. And so the just literally just being there and existing as a black woman or femme, or an indigenous woman or femme in this country, is extremely radical and extremely Emperor. I think a lot of marginalized people can take from this card the idea that part of our liberation is just being here and existing and being present. And so, you could put that on your altar, you can put that up in your space, you can get an art piece of the Emperor to really, like, embody that and to feel that. Okay, we've talked a lot today. I had a lot to say about the Emperor. I didn't mention this, but the Emperor actually is one of my favorite cards in the tarot, and it's one that I really personally relate to. And when I first learned about the Emperor, I was actually surprised that everybody didn't like it, because I never learned that patriarchal version, and thank God, because I just don't think it applies to anything. I really feel good about the Emperor card. If you're having particular challenges in your life, if you would like a reading to learn more about how to take up space, or for anything really, if you just want to get a tarot reading from somebody who is putting marginalized people first and at the center, I will be offering tarot readings very soon. My intuitive counseling books are still closed, but I plan to, as soon as I can get my website done, I plan to start offering tarot readings as my first offering. So if you're interested in that, I will first be letting my patrons know. So again, you can follow me at patreon.com/queermagical. If you sign up, you not only get first access and discounted access at some tiers to readings, but you also get to learn in depth more about the tarot. You get personal support from me. We're currently talking about some of the majors and how they relate to the knights for movement in the tarot. So that's something you can learn about. And as I mentioned, have an Emperor post coming soon to get access to all the previous posts as well. So I would love it if you support me. That really is the main source of my income. So we're trying to build it up. Patreon.com/queermagical would mean so much to me. If you're not able, that's okay. The second people who get access are those who subscribe to my free monthly newsletter. And so both links will be available below. And I would love to work with you. I also want to note that for any BIPOC clients, sliding scale all the way down to free. So whatever you need, I'm here for you to support you. And like I said, if you're not BIPOC, you can note that you'll get access to discounted readings if you do join Patreon, and that has some pretty accessible tiers available for you. So thank you so much for sticking with me through this long tarot study episode about the Emperor, and I look forward to seeing you again next time for the Hierophant. If you missed the earlier majors that we have discussed, you can check out the playlist on my channel for tarot study. Thanks.